Admiral Vex-9 clicked his mandibles in annoyance as he reviewed the battle reports flooding his neural interface. The Galactic Council's most elite warship, the Sovereign's Wrath, had been circling this backwater system for 3 rotations now, and still no sign of surrender from the primitive inhabitants below. "These humans," he muttered, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical display. "They fight like cornered zephyr cats. No strategy, no logic, just stubbornness." His tactical officer, Lieutenant Crix, turned from her console with what could generously be called confusion written across her scaled features. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the planet's surface. It's peculiar." Vex-9's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary pair continued monitoring fleet movements. "Define peculiar, Lieutenant. Are they finally ready to discuss terms?" "Not exactly, sir." Crix's voice carried that particular tone that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. "The transmission is coming from Captain Marcus Reed of the Human Defense Force. He's requesting safe passage for non-combatants." A wet, clicking laugh escaped Vex-9's throat. "Safe passage?" "They're surrounded by 12 dreadnoughts, 43 destroyers, and enough firepower to glass their entire continent. What non-combatants could possibly be worth negotiating for at this point?" The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Vex-9 had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, had conquered 47 worlds, and had never encountered a species quite so irritatingly persistent as these humans. "Patch the transmission through," he ordered, settling his bulk into his command chair. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a dust-covered human male with piercing green eyes and what appeared to be dried blood on his left temple. "This is Admiral Vex-9 of the Sovereign's Wrath," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been denied. "I assume you're ready to surrender your pathetic little world?" The human's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so grim. "Actually, Admiral, I'm calling to propose a deal." Vex-9's secondary eyes rolled in exasperation. "A deal?" "Captain Reed, your cities are burning, your orbital defenses are scrap metal floating in space, and your military is reduced to hiding in caves like primitive tunnel dwellers. What could you possibly offer that would interest the Galactic Council?" "Information," Reed said simply. "Intel about human defensive capabilities that could save you significant casualties in future campaigns." Now this was interesting. Vex-9 leaned forward, his interest genuinely piqued. The humans had proven surprisingly resourceful, managing to destroy 3 of his escort frigates and damage 2 destroyers with what should have been obsolete technology. If they were willing to share their tactical innovations. "Continue," Vex-9 said, his tone shifting to something resembling professional respect. Reed's expression remained steady. "In exchange for this information, I need guaranteed safe passage for a group of non-combatants currently trapped in the Riverside Medical Complex." "Medical personnel?" Vex-9 asked. "Wounded soldiers?" "Children," Reed said quietly. 43 kids, ages 3 to 12. The complex was hit during your initial bombardment. The staff evacuated most patients, but these children, they're too sick to move safely. Cancer patients mostly, some recovering from major surgeries." Vex-9's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign his officers had learned indicated either extreme annoyance or deep thought, sometimes both. "Captain Reed, you're asking me to risk valuable resources and potentially compromise tactical advantage for offspring who contribute nothing to your war effort?" "That's exactly what I'm asking." The Admiral's tactical display showed the medical complex, a modest building surrounded by the rubble of what had once been a thriving metropolitan area. Sensors indicated minimal defensive capability and life signs consistent with the human's claim. "Sir," Lieutenant Crix whispered, "our intelligence suggests this could be a trap. Humans are known for their deceptive tactics." Guillaume Vex-9 considered this. In his extensive experience, most species would sacrifice their young if it meant preserving their military assets. It was basic survival logic. The strong protect the continuation of the species by eliminating threats, even if it meant temporary losses among the weak. But humans consistently defied logic. "Captain Reed," Vex-9 said slowly, "explain to me why a military commander would prioritize sick children over potentially gaining strategic advantage through continued resistance." Reed's green eyes flashed with something that made even the experienced Admiral shift uncomfortably. "Because, Admiral, those children didn't choose this war. They didn't vote for the politicians who refused your initial demands. They're just kids who want to go home to their families." "Sentiment," Vex-9 muttered to himself. "Pure emotional irrationality." "Maybe," Reed agreed, "but it's our irrationality. And if you want that intelligence data, this is my price." The bridge crew exchanged glances. In 2 centuries of military service, None of them had encountered a negotiation quite like this. Enemy commanders typically bargained for their own lives, for their remaining forces, for favorable surrender terms. They didn't risk everything for individuals who provided no tactical benefit. "The information you're offering," Vex-9 said, his tone carefully neutral. "How do I know it's worth 43 evacuation slots on my transport vessels?" Reed's expression didn't change, because 3 days ago you lost the destroyer Tempest's Edge to what your sensors probably classified as a lucky missile strike. It wasn't luck. We've developed adaptive targeting algorithms that can predict your evasive maneuvers based on engine output patterns. That's how we've managed to damage ships that should have been untouchable. Vex-9's primary eyes widened. The loss of Tempest's Edge had been troubling precisely because it seemed impossible. Human weapons technology was centuries behind galactic standard. Yet somehow, you're claiming your primitive targeting systems can predict advanced military maneuvers? "I'm not claiming anything," Reed replied. "I'm offering to show you exactly how we did it. Complete technical specifications, algorithm breakdowns, even the psychological profiles we developed of your tactical officers' decision-making patterns." Lieutenant Crix's scales rippled, a clear sign of anxiety. If humans could predict galactic Navy tactics with that level of precision, it would revolutionize their understanding of interspecies warfare. "And all you want in return is safe passage for sick children." "All I want," Reed said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to press against the bridge's atmosphere, "is for those kids to live long enough to maybe grow up." Vex-9 turned to his tactical display, studying the medical complex's location. The evacuation would require 2 transport shuttles, minimal escort, and perhaps an hour of his time. Against the potential intelligence value, "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving multiple priority transmissions from Galactic Command. They're requesting immediate status updates on the human surrender timeline." The Admiral's mandibles clicked irritably. Command wanted this campaign concluded quickly, cleanly, with minimal casualties and maximum intimidation value for other potential resistance worlds. Spending resources on enemy civilians would not fit their preferred narrative. "But the intelligence," Captain Reed, Vex-9 said finally, "you understand that once I have your information there's nothing preventing me from simply resuming bombardment of your remaining positions." Reed nodded. "I understand, but those children will be safe. And you're willing to potentially sacrifice your remaining defensive capability for that outcome?" "Yes." The simple certainty in Reed's voice was more unsettling than any battle cry Vex-9 had ever heard. This human was calmly, rationally choosing to potentially doom his entire species' resistance effort for the sake of 43 individuals who couldn't possibly contribute to their survival. It was the most alien thing the Admiral had encountered in 2 centuries of interstellar warfare. "Lieutenant Crix," he said slowly, "prepare 2 transport shuttles for evacuation duty. Medical configuration, full life support, pediatric care equipment." "Sir?" Crix's voice carried clear confusion. "You heard me. And prep a data reception array for technical intelligence transfer." Vex-9 turned back to the view screen where Reed waited patiently. "Captain, you have 1 hour to deliver your intelligence package and prepare your passengers for transport." Reed's expression shifted, showing the first crack in his professional demeanor. Relief, gratitude, and something that might have been surprise flickered across his features. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet, Captain. Once those children are safe, this planet's fate returns to military necessity." "I understand." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Vex-9 stared at the tactical display, trying to process what had just occurred. In his experience, warfare was about resource allocation, strategic advantage, and survival optimization. Emotions were liabilities that got soldiers killed and civilizations conquered. But this human had just demonstrated something that challenged every assumption about rational behavior in crisis situations. "Sir," Lieutenant Crix said carefully, "Galactic Command is going to want an explanation for this resource allocation." Vex-9's secondary eyes focused on her while his primary pair continued studying the planet below.
"Then we'll tell them the truth, Lieutenant. We're acquiring invaluable intelligence about human tactical capabilities in exchange for minimal resource expenditure."
"And the emotional component of the negotiation?" The Admiral's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "The emotional component, Lieutenant, may be the most important intelligence of all." As the transport shuttles launched toward the planet's surface, Vex-9 found himself wondering if the Galactic Council truly understood what they were facing in humanity. It wasn't their technology, their weapons, or even their stubborn resistance that made them dangerous. It was their willingness to choose compassion over logic, sacrifice over survival, hope over rational assessment of odds. And for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vex-9 wasn't entirely certain that superior firepower would be enough to defeat that kind of enemy. The shuttles disappeared into the planet's atmosphere, carrying medical equipment toward 43 children who would never know that their lives had been purchased with military secrets that could change the course of a war. But Captain Marcus Reed would know. And somehow, Vex-9 suspected that knowledge would make the human even more dangerous than before. The medical transport shuttles had been gone for 37 minutes when Lieutenant Crix received the data package from Captain Reed. Her scaled fingers danced across the console as terabytes of information flooded their systems, and her expression grew increasingly troubled with each passing second. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying a note that Vex-9 had learned to associate with very bad news or very good news, sometimes both. "You need to see this immediately." Vex-9's four eyes shifted from the tactical display to his communications officer. "Is the human's intelligence package legitimate?" "Sir, it's more than legitimate. It's..." Crix paused, apparently struggling with vocabulary. "It's terrifying." The main view screen filled with technical diagrams, algorithm matrices, and behavioral prediction models that made Vex-9's primary brain hurt just looking at them. But what made his secondary brain start calculating retreat vectors was the level of detail. "These psychological profiles," he muttered, scrolling through files labeled with his officers' names. "How did they acquire such specific information about our command structure?" "According to their documentation," Crix replied, her scales shifting through nervous color patterns. "They've been monitoring our communications, analyzing our tactical responses, and building behavioral models for the past 6 months. They know how Commander Thalau reacts under pressure, when you're likely to authorize orbital bombardment, even which officers you trust for specific mission types." Vex-9's mandibles clicked rapidly. 6 months ago, humans hadn't even known the Galactic Council existed. Their first contact with interstellar civilization had been his fleet's arrival demanding surrender. Yet somehow, in that brief period, they'd managed to... "Sir," another officer called from the sensor station. "The transport shuttles have reached the medical complex. They're requesting permission to begin evacuation procedures." "Granted," Vex-9 said absently, his attention focused on a particularly unsettling document titled Adaptive Combat Psychology, Exploiting Hierarchical Command Structures in Multi-Species Military Organizations. The humans hadn't just figured out how to predict his fleet's movements. They'd reverse-engineered the entire command philosophy of the Galactic Navy, identified its weaknesses, and developed countermeasures that could potentially... "Lieutenant Crix," he said slowly, "run a simulation. Based on this intelligence, what would be the projected outcome if humanity shared these techniques with other resistance movements?" The bridge fell silent except for the hum of processing systems. When the results appeared on screen, Vex-9's secondary eyes immediately began calculating emergency jump coordinates. "Sir, the simulation projects a 67% reduction in Galactic Navy effectiveness across all theater operations. If other species adopted these psychological warfare techniques combined with adaptive targeting algorithms, our entire expansion campaign would grind to a halt." Vex-9 finished grimly. A new voice crackled through the communications array. "Sovereign's Wrath, this is Transport Leader Zalk. We've reached the medical facility. Admiral, you need to hear this." Vex-9's patience was already wearing thin. "Report, Transport Leader." "Sir, the human children, they're exactly as Captain Reed described. Sick kids, medical equipment, no military value whatsoever. But sir, the human medical staff, they're refusing evacuation." "Explain." Grig's voice carried a mixture of confusion and something that might have been admiration. "The doctors and nurses insist on staying with patients who can't be moved. They say someone needs to maintain care for the terminal cases. The ones too sick for transport. They're choosing to remain in a war zone rather than abandon patients." Captain Snine's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. In his experience, medical personnel were among the first to evacuate during military operations. They were valuable, trained, rational individuals who understood their worth to society. "Sir," Sal continued, "one of the human doctors, a female named Lisa Park, specifically requested that we take her spot on the transport and give it to a maintenance worker who's been helping care for the children. She said, and I quote, 'Jake's got kids of his own at home. These children need someone who understands how much they're loved.'" The bridge crew exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their collective understanding of rational behavior during wartime. Or rather, their collective lack of understanding regarding human decision-making processes. "Transport Leader Zalk," Vex-9 said carefully, "are you certain these humans understand that remaining at the facility means probable death when we resume bombardment?" "Yes, sir." Captain Reed explained the situation very clearly. "They understand completely. They're staying anyway." Vex-9 turned to study the tactical display showing the medical complex. 43 sick children, soon to be safely aboard his transports. An unknown number of medical personnel, choosing certain death over abandoning patients they couldn't save. It was the most strategically pointless decision he'd ever witnessed. And somehow, it was also the most tactically brilliant. "Sir," Lieutenant Crick said quietly, "I'm receiving priority communications from Galactic Command. High Admiral Corvin wants immediate confirmation of human surrender and projected timeline for planetary occupation." Vex-9 stared at the intelligence package still scrolling across his screens. Months of careful observation, psychological analysis, and tactical innovation traded for the lives of children who contributed nothing to humanity's war effort. Except, "Lieutenant, run another simulation. Factor in the psychological impact of this evacuation on our crew's morale and combat effectiveness." "Sir?" "You heard me. Calculate the combat implications of our personnel witnessing enemy civilians choosing to sacrifice themselves for others." The simulation results were even more disturbing than the first. Galactic Navy doctrine relied heavily on the assumption that all species prioritized survival above sentiment. Their training, their tactics, their entire strategic framework assumed that sufficient pressure would force rational surrender. But humans weren't rational. And worse, their irrationality was becoming contagious. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "Transport Leader Zalk reports successful evacuation of 43 pediatric patients. All children are aboard and receiving medical care."
The human medical staff has. Sir, they've provided detailed care instructions for each child, including personal messages from family members.
"Personal messages?" "Yes, sir. Apparently the parents recorded goodbye videos, just in case. The medical staff insisted we deliver them along with the children." Vex-9's primary brain was beginning to develop what humans might have called a headache. These creatures were systematically dismantling every assumption about warfare, survival, and rational behavior that he'd accumulated over 2 centuries. "Sir," Lieutenant Crick said, her voice carrying a new note of urgency, "we're receiving an incoming transmission from High Admiral Corvin himself." The main view screen flickered, replacing the intelligence data with the imposing figure of the Galactic Navy's Supreme Commander. High Admiral Corvin's 6 eyes fixed on Vex-9 with the intensity of someone who had not achieved his position through patience or understanding. "Admiral Vex-9, Corvin's voice carried across space with the authority of absolute power. "Explain why your planetary conquest is 3 rotations behind schedule." Vex-9 straightened in his command chair. "High Admiral, the humans have proven more resourceful than initial intelligence suggested." "Resourceful?" Corvin's secondary eyes narrowed dangerously. "Admiral, they're a pre-spaceflight civilization armed with primitive weapons and delusions of adequacy. You command the most powerful battle fleet in this sector. How are they still resisting?" "Sir, I've just acquired significant intelligence regarding human tactical capabilities. Their psychological warfare techniques are unlike anything we've encountered." "Psychological warfare?" Corvin's laugh was wet and unpleasant. "Admiral, are you seriously telling me that you're being outmaneuvered by emotional primitives?" Vex-9 glanced at the tactical display showing 43 human children safely aboard his medical transports. Children whose parents had recorded goodbye messages. Children whose caretakers had chosen death over abandonment. "Sir, human combat psychology operates on principles that our standard tactical doctrine cannot effectively counter. They make decisions based on factors that our strategic models don't account for. Such as compassion." "High Admiral, they prioritize the welfare of non-combatants over military advantage. They sacrifice strategic resources for emotional satisfaction. Vex-9 paused, struggling with concepts that didn't translate well into military terminology. "They choose hope over logic." Corvin's expression shifted through several shades of disbelief before settling on cold anger. "Admiral Vex-9, you are commanding the Sovereign's wrath, not a philosophical research vessel. Your orders are simple: conquer or destroy. I don't care if they're motivated by compassion, greed, or interpretive dance. Make them surrender or make them extinct." "Yes, sir. However, I believe it would be strategically valuable to study their psychological techniques before." "Admiral." Corvin's voice dropped to the tone that had preceded several high-ranking officers' early retirements. "You have 6 hours to complete planetary pacification. If human resistance continues beyond that time frame, you will commence total surface bombardment. No exceptions, no negotiations, no more delays." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Vex-9 stared at the intelligence package that could revolutionize galactic warfare, at the tactical display showing a planet full of irrationally brave humans, at the transport shuttles carrying 43 children who would live because their enemy had chosen mercy over victory. "Sir," Lieutenant Crick said quietly, "what are your orders?" Vex-9's mandibles clicked slowly as he considered his options. 6 hours to force surrender from a species that traded military secrets for sick children. 6 hours to defeat an enemy whose medical personnel chose death over abandonment. 6 hours to conquer people who somehow made tactical brilliance out of strategic suicide. "Lieutenant, open a channel to Captain Reed." The view screen filled with the human's dusty, determined face. Reed looked tired, but not defeated. Behind him, Vex-9 could see the smoking ruins of what had once been a thriving city. "Captain," Vex-9 said, his voice carefully neutral, "your intelligence package has been received and verified. The children are safe aboard my medical transports." Relief flickered across Reed's features. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet, Captain. I have new orders from High Admiral Corvin. Total planetary bombardment begins in 6 hours unless your forces surrender unconditionally." Reed nodded slowly. "I understand. Will you give us 1 hour to discuss terms with our remaining command structure?" 1 hour, Vex-9 agreed. The transmission ended, and Vex-9 found himself staring at a tactical problem that had no clean solution. He could follow orders, commence bombardment, and turn a habitable world into radioactive wasteland. It would be efficient, final, and exactly what High Admiral Corvin expected. Or he could make a choice that his training, his experience, and his entire military career told him was strategically insane. "Lieutenant Crix," he said finally, "prepare a secure data burst to the transport convoy, carrying the human children. Include Captain Reed's intelligence package and my personal assessment of human psychological warfare capabilities." "Sir, where should I direct the transmission?" Vex-9's 4 eyes fixed on the planet below, where humans were probably spending their final hour choosing between certain death and uncertain surrender. "Send it to the Galactic Council's Strategic Research Division. Mark it Priority Alpha, and Lieutenant—" "Yes, sir." "Include a personal recommendation that humanity be classified as a protected species under the Galactic Accords." The bridge fell silent. In 2 centuries of military service, none of them had ever heard Admiral Vex-9 recommend protection for a conquest target. "Sir," Crick said carefully, "High Admiral Corvin will interpret that recommendation as insubordination." Vex-9's mandibles clicked once, decisively. "Then I suppose, Lieutenant, we'll find out whether the Galactic Navy values tactical innovation more than blind obedience." As the transport convoy jumped to hyperspace, carrying 43 human children toward safety and a data package that could change the nature of interstellar warfare, Vex-9 realized that Captain Reed had won more than just an evacuation. He'd won a war that hadn't even been declared yet. And he'd done it by choosing cubs over victory.